It was early morning at a bustling international airport. The terminal buzzed with activity. Announcements echoed, trolleys rolled by, and travelers moved in a steady stream. Amidst the crowd, a simple-looking woman made her way toward the first-class check-in counter. Dressed in a modest normal clothes, her hair tied back neatly, no makeup, no jewelry. She looked like someone you'd barely notice in a crowd. She clutched a small, clean but worn-out handbag and rolled behind her a single piece of luggage. As she reached the counter, the airline staff glanced up. Their eyes scanned her from head to toe, and they exchanged smirks. One of them, a young woman in uniform, stepped forward with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice was laced with sarcasm as she said, "Excuse me, ma'am, this is the first-class counter. Economy is on the other side." The woman, unshaken, responded calmly, "I know. I have a first-class ticket." The words hung in the air for a second before another staff member let out a short laugh. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for others to hear. Without asking any further, the staff member reached over and snatched the woman's ticket from her hand. He looked at it, frowned slightly, and then looked back at her with suspicion. Instead of confirming her booking, he tossed her luggage aside carelessly, as if it had no value, and turned to the others. "This must be a mistake. Call security." Nearby passengers began to slow down, noticing the scene unfolding. Some turned to watch, others whispered among themselves. A few looked on with sympathy, but most assumed she had wandered into the wrong line. Within moments, 2 uniformed security guards arrived. One of them stepped in front of her with a stern look. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. This area is for first-class passengers only." The woman, still holding her ground, said softly, "I paid for a first-class ticket. Please check again." But no one listened. The staff shook their heads, and one of them, visibly irritated now, said, "First class isn't for people like you. Don't create a scene. Step away, or we'll have to remove you." She stood silent, her pride bruised, but her face calm. The humiliation washed over her like a cold wave, but she didn't argue, didn't cry. Slowly, she reached into her bag, took out her phone, and walked a few steps to the side. Her voice was steady and composed as she made a single phone call. "Hi, can you please handle this?" Then she hung up, slipped the phone back into her bag, and waited. She stood quietly near the corner of the terminal, hands folded in front of her, her eyes slightly moist, but without a trace of anger. She wasn't looking for sympathy, nor did she react to the stares and murmurs around her. The staff behind the counter continued laughing, making light of the situation as if they had just handled a harmless intrusion. One of them chuckled. She didn't even argue, probably realized her mistake. Another whispered, "Why is she acting so calm?" She didn't even raise her voice. Outside, the screech of tires broke the rhythm of the terminal. A sleek, black luxury car halted sharply at the entrance. Doors swung open, and a tall, sharply dressed man stepped out with swift precision. His presence commanded immediate attention. Behind him followed 2 assistants in suits, their pace matching his intensity. The terminal's energy shifted. Security turned alert. Staff paused. Passengers looked up from their phones. Cameras clicked. Whispers started circulating. Something was happening. The man didn't slow down. He walked past the check-in queues, straight through the security gates without being stopped. No one dared. Eyes followed him, and in seconds, he was standing in front of the woman who had just been shamed moments ago. His expression softened as he reached for her hand. Without a word, he gently held it and looked into her eyes. "I'm so sorry you had to face this," he said quietly. She looked up at him, still composed, her expression unreadable. The staff at the counter froze, confused. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Wait, isn't that Larry Ellison? The airline's CEO? The staff exchanged panicked looks. No one moved. Then, Ellison turned toward them, his expression hardening. He took a few slow steps until he was standing right at the counter, the same one where his wife had just been humiliated. Who here decided that my wife didn't belong in first class? The room fell silent. Wife? One staff member stuttered, his face drained of color. Yes, my wife, Ellison said sharply. Not just my wife, she's the reason this airline exists. Gasps rippled through the surrounding crowd. Somewhere in the background, a journalist lifted a camera and began filming. In that moment, flashes of memory passed through Ellison's mind. She was there in the early days when no one believed in him. She worked 2 jobs to help fund his vision. He remembered her removing her gold bangles and quietly placing them on the table when he couldn't pay a supplier. She was the one who sat up at night, sketching ideas for the airline's logo on torn paper, shaping what would one day become a billion-dollar brand. Now, the same woman was being laughed at for not wearing diamonds, and Larry Ellison was not going to let that pass. The counter was engulfed in a heavy silence. Every pair of eyes in the vicinity was fixed on the woman and the man now standing beside her. She remained poised, unshaken, as if the earlier humiliation had never touched her spirit. Larry Ellison, still burning with restrained fury, took a step toward the stunned staff. His voice, calm yet cutting, broke the silence. You judged her by her clothes, he said, locking eyes with each of them. By her simplicity. You forgot the very foundation of service, respect. The staff, still trying to comprehend what was happening, stumbled over their words. One of them stammered, Sir, we thought… Ellison interrupted sharply. Exactly. You thought. Instead of checking, instead of doing your job, you chose to assume. The smug expressions were gone, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Ellison didn't need to shout. His authority echoed louder than any raised voice. He looked at the name tags one by one, repeating them slowly. You, suspended. He turned to another. You, suspended. Then, facing the supervisor who had mocked her the most, he said without hesitation, You, terminated, effective immediately. Mouths fell open. Even the onlookers, who had been watching quietly, couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The airport authorities rushed in, faces pale, trying to control the scene, offering apologies, clearly panicked. But Ellison was unmoved. In that tense moment, his wife gently placed a hand on his arm. Her voice was soft but firm. That Alex, she said, nodding toward the youngest staff member at the counter. He tried to stop them. He said nothing rude. Let one person here keep their job, because he at least had a conscience. Ellison looked at the Alex, who stood nervously with his head slightly bowed. He nodded once, approvingly. You'll report directly to my office from tomorrow. The tension slowly began to shift. A nearby passenger started clapping, then another. Soon, a ripple of applause filled the terminal. People who had watched her humiliation now stood in support. Some even recorded the moment on their phones. A journalist, already typing furiously on his device, hit send on a tweet that would soon go viral. Airline CEO shuts down classism at his own counter in defense of his humble-looking wife. The moment captured something deeper, not just a defense of a loved one, but a stand against everything shallow, biased, and broken in how people judge others. Ellison didn't just restore her dignity, he reminded everyone watching what dignity truly meant. And she, still silent beside him, didn't need a spotlight to shine. Her strength had already lit the room. The terminal lights cast a soft glow as the couple walked slowly toward the boarding gate, hand in hand. The chaos behind them had settled, but the weight of what had transpired still lingered in the air. The woman walked in silence, her grip on Ellison's hand steady, her expression calm but touched with emotion. She hadn't needed to raise her voice, yet she had been heard louder than anyone in that terminal. Ellison glanced sideways at her, his voice low and full of quiet pride. "You always told me, never show power with anger," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "Today, I'm glad you made that call." Behind them, the dismissed staff stood frozen near the check-in counter. Their faces were pale, their pride shattered. As the couple disappeared beyond the security checkpoint, one of them whispered to another, "I never would have guessed. She looked so ordinary." The scene began to dissolve, and in its place came a soft voice, layered over images of the woman's quiet strength, her calm phone call, her simple appearance, and the stunned reactions of everyone who had misjudged her. This world judges too quickly. We measure people by the clothes they wear, the way they speak, or the brand of their bag. We forget that appearance isn't character, and status isn't always visible. We mistake simplicity for weakness. But true power doesn't make noise. It walks beside you quietly, needing no validation. True wealth isn't draped in diamonds. It's in the heart that chooses dignity over drama, grace over revenge. And those who look ordinary are often the most extraordinary of all. The scene shifted again. The first-class cabin glowed softly under ambient lighting. The woman stepped in, guided by a different flight attendant, this one offering a respectful bow with genuine warmth. She nodded with a gentle smile and took her seat by the window. No grand declarations, no visible pride, just a quiet presence that now carried 1,000 unspoken lessons. As the plane taxied onto the runway, she leaned back into her seat. The engines began to hum, and the world outside the window started to move. The woman turned to gaze out, her expression unreadable but serene. And just before takeoff, as the aircraft began to lift, a soft smile touched her lips, not one of triumph, but of quiet justice. On screen, as the music gently faded in, the words appeared in silence. Never judge anyone by their appearance. Dignity, kindness, and humility are the real marks of greatness.